So today we're doing a Tableau on Tableau Finance Analytics, an example of how Tableau internally is using our own product to support and help our finance teams. My name is Mike Crook, and I'm the Director of Finance Analytics here at Tableau. Before we start talking or showing you some of the different examples that we have, I want to talk a little bit about kind of the challenge and the opportunity that we face inside of finance. Now, for most companies, right, we're loading our general ledger from details from some source system, whether it's a payroll system, fixed assets, etc. Now, the result of that is the information is being aggregated as it's loaded into the general ledger, which then is forcing our accountants and our analysts to have to go to those source systems and export some of that data. And typically, they're exporting it into Excel. Now, also with our financial data, we know that the data is constantly changing, certainly in open periods, but we also know that it has the opportunity to change, or the potential to change, even in closed periods. And then many organizations are spending hours, days, if not weeks, trying to prepare information to share with their management and executive teams. And then just given the sensitivities of the data, there's also some heightened security around our ability to access that information. So now when we start to think about the opportunity that Tableau can present to us, we start to think about some of these use cases of how Tableau can be used with our data validation for the ad hoc analytics, to be able to connect the data that's coming from multiple different data sources, and then using other features that allow for some of the data governance and analytics on the go. So when I talk to any organization, but particularly finance departments, what I want to remind them is, start small and keep it simple. You don't need a database or a large database warehouse to begin using Tableau. Now, ultimately, you may end up needing that, especially since Tableau may not be able to connect to your source systems. And while it can connect to many of the major leading database platforms, just because of some of those security controls and things like that, you may not be able to connect directly there. So your analysts have already figured out a way to get that information out of those systems, typically dumping it into Excel. So what we want to challenge you to do is see how much faster you can get to those quick wins and those early insights using Tableau instead of trying to do that analysis inside of Excel. Now use these rapid prototypes to have that conversation with your IT team and see what can they do to help you take Excel out of the equation. Can we land that information into an environment or a platform that will be easy for Tableau to connect to? Now, some of the dashboards I'm going to show you are years in the making. They've just gone through iterations as we've tried to fine-tune them and get them to where they are today. But what I'm also going to show you is how quickly you can create some of these inside of Tableau. Now here at Tableau, our finance team is just over 100 employees. And if I start to think about how we're leveraging Tableau internally, I can kind of bucket us into these 4 different groups, where 100% of us have access to Tableau Desktop and Tableau Server. And yes, we know we're very lucky to have that. But then there's the smaller percentage, maybe 75%, that are actually now being informed by the data. Now, whether this is through a workbook on the network, a workbook that's been published up to Tableau Server or Tableau Online, or maybe they're getting a daily or weekly subscription of some of the information that they care the most about from Tableau Server. And then the smaller percentage are now interacting with that data. Maybe just seeing that subscription wasn't enough information for them. They wanted to change a filter. They wanted to look at the underlying details. Maybe that dashboard is part of their workflow that they're then navigating from it and using URL actions to go into another system. And then there's that smaller subset of folks who are actually building out content, whether this is actually finished dashboards that people are interacting with or using for reporting, or maybe they're the subject matter experts on the underlying data and they're building out published data sources that are either live or extracts that are up on the Tableau Server environment. Now here at Tableau, we're using our product in a number of different ways. And here are just some of the use cases that I'll be walking you through today. And so if you don't see something on this list, it doesn't mean that Tableau isn't doing it or Tableau can't do it. It's just this is just a subset of those. But so just thinking about inside of accounting, using it for variance analysis, FP&A, using it for T&E compliance and analyst reporting, internal audit for fraud detection, and many of these others. Now, some of these use cases that are up here, particularly like the FP&A, internal audit, and treasury, we actually have done webinars in our on-demand series on these topics. So if you haven't explored them before, I encourage you to check those out. And when I think about where our data is coming from, and this is not an exhaustive list, but in the top left are some of the data sources, right? These are the main systems that are storing and using our financial data. NetSuite is our general ledger, Salesforce is our CRM system. We're then using Anaplan for our budgeting and forecasting, and then hopefully you guys recognize some of these other names like Concur, Coupa, and Agencia. And then we're using a bunch of different tools. So whether it's Alteryx, SQL Management Studios, Talent, even Tableau Prep, we're using those to then move this information. Now these that are shown here are actually connecting to those source systems and then extracting that information and then loading it into databases. Now, in some cases, it's just putting it into an Excel or a hyper extract. Maybe it's an Access database if it's something simple, or maybe you need a bigger platform like Amazon Redshift, Snowflake, or SQL Server. And then here are just a few examples of how we're taking those source systems, the technologies that are being used to move that data, and then where we're landing that information. When I talk to some finance teams, often they ask, okay, what does my team do here at Tableau? How big is my team? Some organizations will have large business intelligence departments. Maybe you have small little analytics teams. Now, so this is a little bit about my team. We're small. There's only 5 of us. But what we're doing is we're not necessarily out there building dashboards for our business partners inside of finance. Well, we do that from time to time. What we're really focused on is trying to ensure that they have access to the data that they need to make decisions and drive the growth of the organization. So we spend more time on trying to find out what is the data that they need. Where is it stored? How can we get that information and land it into a platform that will make it easier for them to consume? Maybe that is a partnership with IT and we need to land it into some of our production reporting environments, or maybe it's just doing something quick and easy for them. And when I think about how we're then sharing this information, here's just kind of a sneak peek into a little bit of how our Tableau server, our environment is structured. So your network has folders, right, where you're capturing information. Well, Tableau Server and Tableau Server has projects. And so you have sites and then projects, and then that's where you're storing your workbooks. And so here are just a couple of examples that I've shown of our accounting project, our archive, so that we start to move information out of that common reporting environment. So if it's not being used much anymore, but also what we're doing with our FP&A team, investor relations, and our executives. And these are just a few examples of the projects that we have. Now, these pictures at the bottom are really small. I'm sorry for that. But what they're showing you is just the growth that we have in our published data sources. Again, that's a big part of what my team is doing, is since we understand the back-end database and the relations of the data, so we can do those joins and those calculations so that our business partners don't have to worry about that. They can trust the information, and we're actually certifying that content inside of Tableau Server. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break of talking about some of the theory and just how we're doing this. And what I want to do before I jump into all of the examples is I want to show you how easy it is to build a Tableau dashboard, because some of you may not have ever done that before. So here's an example of our accounts receivable dashboard. And this is one of them that we'll see as an example. But what this dashboard is doing is it's allowing the user to interact with our accounts receivable data, right? Accounts receivable is we have sold some software to a customer and we've invoiced them for that purchase. And what our accounts receivable team needs to do is they now need to collect the money that's associated with that invoice. So what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through just a few of the steps that it's going to take to build out this dashboard. So see, there's kind of 3 or 4 different things here. We have a map, we have a list by country, we have a list by our customers, and then we also have a list by the invoice. So let's step through each of the processes to bring this information together. Now, the first thing that any of us is going to do when we're inside of Tableau and we're trying to analyze this data is we want to understand what we have. So I'm just going to go ahead and see View Details. And now this are all of the rows that make up this data source. You can see all the columns here, the calculated fields are being presented, and then the information that was available to us. Now, when I was analyzing this data, I realized there's a few things that we needed that wasn't available in the data source. Well, the first one is I wanted to know what the net amount outstanding was. And the net amount outstanding, if I just do a right click and do edit, and you'll be able to see this calculation, is it's the gross amount less the amount paid. Pretty simple calculation. Now, the second thing I wanted to do is I wanted to take all of the AR aging, so this is how old the invoices are, and I wanted to turn them into buckets. So I have the days past due that's already calculated in the data for me, but I wanted to turn them into buckets. And so with this nested if, I'm just analyzing what the days past due is, and if it's a negative number, it means it hasn't happened yet, I'm going to put it into current. And then I've broken them into 1 through 30, 31 through 60, and you can see the rest of those dates. Now, the last field that I needed wasn't obvious at first, but I needed this when I was doing the map. And what I wanted to be able to do is I wanted to be able to aggregate up all of the outstanding balances and turn that into a weighted average. And so here's the simple statement that we've put into this data source to allow that. So now that we have the 3 additional calculations that we need, we can start to build out those lists and the map that we're going to bring together onto the interactive dashboard. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get a list of all of my customers. So I'm going to drag out my list of customers. Now Tableau's warning me that I have a lot of data here, and do I really want to do this? And in this case I do, so I'm going to say yes. Now I want to take my AR aging buckets that I calculated and I want to turn those into columns. And now you can see that we have all of those column values, and then Tableau is kind of represented where there's information, but I haven't told it what to present yet. Now, when I look at these columns, I recognize that this isn't the order that I want these to be in. I really want current to be first. Now, inside of Tableau, there's always many ways that you can do something. Now, the simplest one to move this is just to drag it and drop it to the beginning. But I also could have changed it by doing the sort order here. Right now, it's set to manual, and if I wanted to move this around, I could do that as well. So now I have the columns the way I want them. I have my list of companies, and I want to bring out my net amount outstanding. So I'm just going to drag this out onto text, and you'll see that all those little ABCs are actually going to turn into numbers. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to add some totals. So there's a couple of different ways in which you can add totals. I'm going to click on the Analytics tab here. I'm going to say totals, and I'm going to drag this out. And then Tableau is going to say, okay, where do you want to put these? Well, what I want to do is I want to add them as a row total. And so now I can see the total across all of the AR aging buckets for all of my companies. And I want to change the sort order. So I'm going to just hit the toggle here, and now I can see the largest company at the top. And maybe I want to add another total. Maybe I do want to have a column total so I can see what the grand total is. Now by default, Tableau put this all the way down at the bottom, but we can move that. I can either drag it up or I can do a right click and I can say bring it to the top. So now if I scroll back up, I now can see the total across all of the AR aging buckets as well as my grand total. Now let's do the list of the countries. Now, if I went and double-clicked on the Ship To country, and you can see that the Tableau recognizes that this is a geographic field. And so because it's a geographic field, it has automatically generated the lat-long coordinates for all of those countries. If I double-click on this, Tableau is going to want to build a map. And that's what it thinks it needs to do with geographic data. Well, in this particular case, I don't want to build a map yet. So I'm going to click the undo button, and I'm going to drag this out and turn it into just a field. And then I want to bring my net amount outstanding out. And again, I could drag it out here, or I could have dragged it onto the text pill that I did before. Now, this is great that I have all these amounts, but I want to see each one of these as a percentage of the total. Now, that could be a complicated calculation, but you know what? Tableau has an easy way to do this. If I hit the little drop-down caret, I can come down here and I can say, I want to do a quick table calculation. And since this is a pretty common thing to do a percent of total, Tableau has built it into the product already. Now I just do percent of total. I have those, but I also wanted to see the amount. So I'm going to double click on net amount outstanding. I now have 2 columns. Maybe I want to change the order in which those are presented. And I also want to sort these to have the biggest one. So now we can see that the United States has over 14 million and represents over 27%. And if I wanted a total, I can do just like I did before. I can drag this out, add a random total. It's all the way down at the bottom again. Right click, say show at top, and now I can see I have that same 52 million and everything is adding up to 100%. So the next thing we wanted was to have that list of the invoices. So I'm just going to start dragging some fields out. Invoice, it's warning me there's lots. Do I want to do it? Yes, I do. I want to bring out the names of my companies. I also want to bring out my AR aging buckets. Now, instead of dragging these to column, since I'm at the lowest level of detail as far as an invoice, I'm going to set that at my row. So now I can see each invoice and what bucket it stands in. I can also bring out my net amount outstanding. Something else that I want to do is I want to be able to use this dashboard to navigate or as a workflow tool to be able to jump from my Tableau dashboard and into our CRM system. So I'm going to show you how we built an action filter. In this case, what I've done is I've told it what is my instance, my URL, my secure URL that's related to our Salesforce instance. And because of how the URLs work inside of Salesforce, I'm actually able to append to it the opportunity ID. And so what this is going to allow the user to do is as they click on it, they'll be able to navigate directly into Salesforce. Now for this to work, I need to put this onto the level of detail, but I don't actually want to show it as a column. And so now, so then the last thing we want to do is build a map. So last time when I double clicked on it, Tableau wanted to build a map. Well, I'm going to do that again. And when I double click on it, Tableau wants to default to just doing circles, but I really want to turn it into a field map. So here under the mark type, I'm going to go down and I'm going to turn it into map. And now Tableau is trying to fill in each of those. And then I'm going to take my weighted average, put that onto my color, and now we can see that it's color coded. And if I wanted to spend time changing these bands and the colors, here are just some simple tips on how you would do that. So we've now created 4 different sheets, and they're all shown here on the left-hand side that are available to me to drag out to my dashboard. So I'm going to double click, and Tableau has defaulted that one. In this case, I'm going to do a right click and say add to dashboard. In this case, I'm actually going to drag it out. And so you can see there's 3 different ways in which I could bring this information onto the dashboard. And I'm going to just remove this color legend for now. But these aren't where I want them. So let's say I want the map up here. I do want my list of countries up there. I want to have my companies over here, bring my list of invoices over here, and now it just turns into a formatting exercise. But you can see that in just 5 minutes, we're able to create 4 different sheets and bring them all onto this dashboard and make them interactive. And so this would be the end result after some additional formatting. Let's jump back into the StoryPoint workbook. So what StoryPoints is a feature inside of Tableau where it allows you to take sheets, turn those sheets into dashboards, and then bring those dashboards all together. And so now I'm going to start walking you through some of the different use cases and examples of those use cases that we're doing inside of Tableau. Now, some people may not, or some people might laugh when they see this statement of sometimes no data on a dashboard is a good thing. But using Tableau as a means to validate your data is a use case that does not get enough attention. So think about this. If there's a key value that you need in your data to calculate a metric or a KPI, what happens if that information is incomplete or doesn't have the domain of values that you're expecting? You're going to have a problem. So build out dashboards that allow you to monitor the health and the cleanliness of your data. Use conditional alerting and subscriptions to be notified when you have a problem. Everyone on my team has a collection of subscriptions that they're monitoring. So every Monday morning, Tableau server is going to kick out an email to them of the dashboards that they needed to monitor. And if there's something that's showing up on that dashboard, they know that they have a problem and there's something that they need to fix. And so hopefully they actually can log into the source system, and in most cases we can, correct the issue or notify somebody else who can correct it, fix it in the source system, and then that information is going to be refreshed into our reporting databases and the other ways in which that we're connected to that information. So once you have clean data and you're monitoring that, now you can start to use that information to do useful and dashboards. Now some of these dashboards are historical, right? They're showing you what happened, but others are showing you maybe what's happening right now. And this is a good example of that. This is a dashboard that we have that we're calling a sales tracker that is connected to information coming from our sales system, which again is Salesforce. And what we're doing is we're using this as a dashboard to monitor how is our sales team doing. We have insight in these blue bars into what they've closed or what deals they've won. We also have insight into their open pipeline. Now, one of the things that we do inside of Salesforce is we put probability weightings on all of our opportunities based on the stage in which that is in. So if it's in an early sales cycle, maybe it has a low probability of closing in this quarter. But if it's later in the sales cycle, there's a higher probability. And so what we're doing is we're applying those probabilities to that. So that's what the difference is here. This 5.7 that we're seeing in the tooltip is the prorated amounts or the expected amounts of the 5.7. Now what we're also showing, and it's in this tooltip, but also this reference line, is what happens if we actually close all of those deals. So we actually have almost $14 million in deals, but we're expecting only 5.7 of that actually to close in this period. And then what we have down here at the bottom is we're bringing that information together and we're comparing it to a reference line. Now this reference line is the goal, the target, the quota that the sales team has to deal with. Now I've just been hovering over all these tooltips, but let's show you how this is interactive. If I select the acquisition column, all of the deals over here on the right have been filtered down by the account, by the deal, and we can see what's happening with that particular department in our sales team. Now, this is just one dashboard that I'm showing you. Our version of this has multiple dashboards where we start at the highest level and we then can drill into the teams and actually go all the way down to the sales rep to see how they're doing. And then we've calculated this ratio to get insight into what is their chance of being able to close all of that stuff, and do we have enough coverage. Now, to understand how our sales is doing is we're doing a daily snapshot of our sales pipeline. Now, we're not snapshotting every field of every opportunity. What we've picked is 5 or 6 different fields, and at the database level, we're snapshotting this information. And so what this allows us to do is now see 180 days out how is this quarter comparing to previous quarters? So, and then once we're in the quarter, we're now 90 days from closing that period. How are we doing and how are we trending? Now, hopefully you've all realized with all this data, this has all been mocked up. None of this is real data. And this workbook, as well as many other resources that are using this information, will be available to all of you to download. As we transition the information from the sales side, right? So you might be saying, okay, why does finance care about the sales? Well, kind of a silly question, but hopefully you understand that the sales is going to turn into the revenue. So the earlier that we can get insight into how our sales team is doing and the revenue that they're producing, we'll now be able to forecast and predict what our revenue is going to be. And the revenue then will show us what our expenses can be if we're going to try and hit the margins that we're expecting. So Tableau was historically a perpetual license model, but we've made this transition to subscription. Now, as part of that transition, it now is complicated how our revenue is working, right? Licenses, perpetual licenses, we were able to recognize the license right away. The maintenance and services, we would be spreading or deferring those costs. And now everything with subscription is all being deferred. So what we did with this dashboard is we're now connected to the information that's from our sales system. We're also connected to the information that's coming out of NetSuite, which are general ledger, and we're now able to model what we predict or are forecasting our revenue to be. And so here the user has the ability through parameters to control how this model is behaving. Right now it's using a custom pipeline weighting. So 50% or 50.5% is being applied to every deal that's in the pipeline and adding it to what's already been closed. But maybe I want to just use the standard pipeline weightings, using those percentages that are being used within our sales system. And so with that simple change, we're able to do that. Or if I wanted to go back and change it back to the custom and change the percentage, the user has the ability to do that as well. So this is an interactive modeling tool that is allowing our executive team to have insight into what the potential revenue is going to be for all of our sales. Now, Tableau is a public company. And so we have a great interest in what our analyst models are predicting that our performance should be. And so what we've done here is we've taken information that's available on essentially public websites. Unfortunately, there's no easy way to directly connect to the information. So we've taken that information and loaded it up into an Excel file, and we've been able to generate this dashboard with the data from that Excel file. And what this is doing is it's now aggregating up all of the information of all of the models from all of the analysts that are covering our company. And so the user here can pick which particular firm that maybe they want to be looking at. We can see that we've now filtered down to Mark Murphy at JP Morgan. We have a scatter plot here that's calculated what the Q2 guidance was from 2016 from each of these different firms. And the user can select on one of these if they want to. So now I've selected on Marquee Research, and the information at the top has been highlighted. Now, what if at the last minute I needed to change my guidance? I don't want to have to go back and enter that into a source system or enter it into an Excel file. The user, through a parameter here, can quickly change it from 195 to 196, and this reference line has been automatically been redrawn. Now, this dashboard is so useful to our executive team. As we finish up our quarterly earnings calls, we then have to call all of the analysts and have a conversation with them. And this is a dashboard that we're bringing up prior to each one of those calls so that we can walk through what their models did and see if we can understand, why did they predict us to miss or to exceed, and what were some of the decision points that they made inside of their models to support those calculations. Because maybe they made a bad assumption, and we want to make sure that they have all the information. Now, this is the fanciest dashboard, but you can see there's a little bit of a visual component to it, but there's also a a plethora of other information that's in here. Now, this is a dashboard that we created before we were a public company. Our executive team was using this on their roadshow and presenting it to some of the future investors in the company. And what we've done is we've visualized what the revenue compared to the operating income non-GAAP was, and then we just brought in the information at a quarterly level, calculated some year-over-year growth, and then we also aggregated that information up to the annual level here. So we're bringing in the revenue and the metrics coming from our income statement. We're then bringing in the cash and the deferred revenue that's coming from the balance sheet side. And then at the bottom is we've brought in the headcount. Now, this may not seem like a big fancy thing to you, but for us, this is an example of how you can start to bring data together from multiple different data sources. Our headcount information is not stored in our general ledger. It's stored in a separate system. So this is how you can connect to multiple systems and bring in information from multiple places and display it together on a dashboard. Now, we're not doing any metrics across these two data sources here, but I have an example later where we're actually turning the headcount and expenses into a per FTE rate. Now, this dashboard isn't easy to see, or this screenshot, I guess is a better way to say that, but think of this as, or not think of it, it is, every one of these thumbnails that are represented here are a critical dashboard for an executive team. This is our executive reporting packet, and then we call this the State of the Union. And so inside of every one of these dashboards are the key KPIs, metrics, trend analysis, retention, turnover rate, how are we selling in particular regions? Anything you can imagine is being represented in one of these dashboards. Now, the beauty of this dashboard, or this collection of dashboards, is that almost every one of these underlying data sources is a live data source, which basically means as the information is being processed and loaded into our systems, being transformed into our reporting databases, this dashboard and these collection of dashboards are being automatically refreshed. Just think of the time savings that our FP&A team has. Think about the time savings that your organization can have if you can put together this collection of key dashboards that give your executives insights into this. Now your analysts don't have to focus on building all of this content inside of Excel and then screenshotting it and putting it into a PowerPoint and then just crossing their fingers that the information doesn't change. They now can spend time on building out new dashboards. What are the new KPIs or metrics that our organization wants to be monitoring? They then can look at the story and understand what the trend is, be able to explain why something is happening versus spending the days of trying to put all this information together. Now, we've gone from the sales side, shown a little bit of some of the executive reporting. Now we're going to do a deeper dive into some of the different teams within inside of finance. Now, if you're new to using Tableau, this might be a typical starting point for you. I want to analyze my expenses, and I want to break those expenses down into some of my categories. This example is using other operating expenses and then sales and marketing, G&A, research and development, and COGS. And what we're showing here is that up at the top is the user has the ability to hover over each of these different periods and see how they're doing, or they can actually interact with it. So this tree map at the bottom is looking at all of these periods. Maybe I only wanted to look at 2018 and I'd be able to do that. Maybe I want to look at the view underlying details and I can now see the information that's behind that data point or all of the rows that have been calculated and aggregated up. Now, this is an income statement. Now, some of you might be arguing with me. It's like, well, Mike, it doesn't look like a true income statement. And why is there all this white space? What I've tried to do in this example is show you how you can bring together information from your actuals, which are coming from your general ledger, and then bring together your budget and forecast information and produce an income statement. Now for us, our budget and forecast is not stored in NetSuite either. It's stored in Anaplan. So we're having to bring this information together to be able to do this. Now the reason why there's all this white space is because I want to have the ability to leverage the functionalities of side of Tableau. I want to be able to expand the year to the quarters. I want to take these roll-ups and I want to blow them up and now break my expenses down into my departments. I want to go even farther and get it down to my cost centers. And maybe depending on how complex I wanted to engineer this, I can actually navigate all the way down to my natural account roll-ups. Now you as the user that are building this dashboard can control how these hierarchies work. Now, one of the things I didn't mention is, well, where were those common subtotals that you would expect to see inside of your income statement? Well, if you haven't noticed already, is they're being shown on a separate sheet here. We've done the calculation of the gross profit and the margin and the operating income and the other key metrics on a separate sheet and then floated them onto this dashboard. So now the user can decide, maybe I don't want to be looking at version 2 of the forecast. What does it do if I compare it to the original plan? And so the user can do that. Maybe I want to change the period of time that I'm looking at. And I only want to look through November, and now all the information has been recalculated. Now this is just the starting point for that conversation or the analysis of your variance. Because now you're going to start here, and then maybe you're going to navigate to another sheet where you're going to do a deeper dive into your actuals so you can actually try and track down what caused this variance to happen. Now using that same information, we've been able to turn the income statement into what we call a management business review. Now, every one of our FP&A analysts is aligned to a different part of our organization. One person is responsible for working with our development team, another one with our sales, another with marketing, and another with operations. And what we've been able to do is we've been able to identify a common look and feel, a starting place for that conversation that each one of them is going to have with the leaders within those organizations. So this dashboard has been pre-filtered down to the development team, but maybe I want to look at operations instead. And this is that first example of how we've been able to do a calculation here. We've been able to bring in our FTE rates and then divide them into our costs. Well, what if I want to switch the versions, which you showed me on the previous screen? Well, the user has the ability to do that here as well. Right now it's showing the second forecast. Now at Tableau, we're doing an annual plan, and then we reforecast twice a quarter. We do a beginning of quarter and an end of quarter forecast. And so and all that information is being loaded into our reporting database. And the user can interact with this in other ways as well. Maybe I want to see how salary and benefits is doing, and only my salary and benefits. And so now the line graph has been filtered to just salary and benefits, and all the bar charts have been recalculated as well. Now something else that was fun with this dashboard is we wanted to make sure that this graph at the top stayed in sync with the tables at the bottom. And so to make that work is we're using a parameter. So right now we have one bar or one column for each one of our dates through August. What if I only wanted to see this at the quarter level? And now through that parameter, you'll see that the bar chart as well as the tables have all been resized to go from the quarter, the month level to the quarter level. Now here's one more way in which we could use that same information that we used to build the income statement as well as the information that we used to build the management business review. And what we're doing here is we're actually comparing our forecasts. We wanted to have a really quick summary of how does our original plan compare to the second forecast. So we're showing that change over quarter as well as the change over departments and then the change over the major account roll-ups. And so this is a quick way to get some insight into, did we move the numbers the way that we expected to move them when we did the reforecast? You know, maybe the CFO came to us and said, okay, we need to be able to, we need to, we're doing really well. We want to drive up our expenses. We can see here that we were able to increase our expenses by 7%. Now, what's bad is we actually we reduced our income by 20%. So we're going to have a major problem here of our revenue going down and our expenses going up. But it's really quick and easy to see that through this comparison chart. So we're going to walk through just a few more examples here, and I'm kind of scrolling out so you can see where we're going to go with this. Now, if you're able to take a bunch of P&L metrics and present them in a similar fashion, here's one way in which you might be able to do that. What we're doing here is we're actually comparing a user-selected FSLI category to our percent of revenue. Right now it's calculating our capital expenditures. Maybe I want to look at it compared to our depreciation and amortization. So we have the line graph here showing those percentage change. We're using color encoding to show what was actual versus projected. And the user can have this table down here if they really needed to see those numbers visually. And as I showed before, you can right-click on a data point and view the underlying detail if you needed to. Maybe this one particular point I wanted to be able to export out of this workbook and use it somewhere else, and that's how you'd be able to do that. Now, this ability to see the underlying details is a user decision. I can choose to allow someone to be able to see that or not. That's right, I guess it's an authoring decision on what the users can do. Now here's an example of how you can visualize some of your capital expenses. Now this could also be different projects inside of your organization. So kind of have these categories up at the top, and the user can filter these. So if I want to filter down to just my corporate IT projects or maybe my office build-outs, I can see them here. And then leveraging the quartiles as well as reference lines, I can see how this project is doing. So this middle one, the project hood, is just over 50% done, and it's still within budget. Now, unfortunately, this other one, the Project Ingram, has exceeded the budget and by quite a bit. So not only do we get the visual here of past the reference line, but we've also color encoded it here to make it easier for the user to see this information. Now, fixed asset data isn't normally something that's easy to visualize. So here's just a few examples of how you might be able to take fixed asset data and present it. Now, one of the challenges that anyone is going to face in trying to analyze fixed asset data, or maybe you're dealing with depreciation, which I guess is related to fixed assets, but maybe you're trying to analyze, maybe who are your active customers, or how many active desktops do you have, or how many active widgets, or whatever that is. For you to be able to do that easily inside of Tableau, you're going to have to do a join to a date table. Now, I'm sure many of you have done this in Excel, just kind of created column headers and done a bunch of calculations to then determine. And we just did a webinar last week on how you can actually analyze this. So if you have any interest in learning about how to bring in dates and do these depreciation schedules, please check out that other webinar. But what we can do now is we have this visual representation of all of our depreciation over all of the periods. I could select, I wouldn't necessarily do a shift click here on the map to get to this chart to see this particular asset. But what I might do is I might select it from this list. So now I can see this computer asset number 4, all of its depreciation over the 3 years of time. I also have a visual representation here in the scatter plot of its cost compared to some of the other assets. The user has the ability to say, okay, maybe I only want to look at my active assets. And right now it's saying I want to look at my active assets as of 7/31. What if I want to look at this at some other period? And the user can easily just use this slider, use this range, and they can go back and see any point in time what was active at that particular time. We also can see all of our depreciation that's been closed, and then if we have any or pending or in progress assets as of November of 2011. So there's lots of functionality that's available to the user with this data. So this isn't the flashiest dashboard, but this is a starting point that maybe you could have in starting to analyze some of your purchasing data. Now, hopefully your organization has recognized the benefit of using purchase orders as a means of trying to control the costs within your organization. And this is just one way that you could start to do some simple analysis on those purchase orders. Table at the top here is just showing over these different subsidiaries, or could these be departments or geographic regions. Using the highlighting here, we can see the different vendors that are appearing that were a part of that. We could do this at the quarter level as well. And then we've done some table calculations across all the data to see what our average discounting is, the average number of POs. But one thing that may not be obvious when you're looking at this data is how much easier it is to visualize the size of the vendors. Now, this is just a simple bar chart, but you now can quickly see how much bigger this first vendor is from the second. If you just had a table of numbers in an Excel file, it may not be that easy, or maybe you're going to have to add a calculated value or a calculated column to do some of those differences. But now you can hopefully see it more visually and get some greater insight into who some of your top vendors are. Now, not every dashboard in here or every sheet is actually a dashboard. Some of these are just screenshots of dashboards that we're using internally. Now, this one is really rough, and it's rough on purpose, but it serves the needs of the accounts receivable manager or accounts payable manager. This is their cockpit. This is what they're monitoring on a daily basis to know, what are the manual bills that are going to be paid today, what are, their check register for open bills, as well as any wires and international payments that are happening. So this is their starting point to understand the volume of work that their team has and being able to track and monitor what's going on there. Now, another component of accounts payable is the receipt or the recognition that we actually received those goods that we're trying to pay for. And so here what we're doing is we're getting insight into who was it that requested this information and this expense, and have they received those goods? So you can see this is kind of a little bit of a naughty list, right? Is we want to have insights into any of these particular employees and how they're doing. And through the action filters here, I now can filter down and we can see that Travis Barker has one particular invoice that they need to receive on. And this information for us is coming from Coupa, which is our purchasing system. Now here's another accounts payable dashboard, and this one also maybe isn't the flashiest dashboard. It's also another one of those monitoring dashboards that's giving insights into the accounts payable manager and any one of their superiors that want to be monitoring this, actually even to their employees as well, to kind of see each of their collectors, how are they doing as far as a status here, a simple kind of tree map, and then how many new suppliers were being created and approved, and then also just some insight into the trends across their organization. So moving on from accounts payable, now here's the accounts receivable dashboard that I walked you through on how you would build and how you would interact with it. Now that we're looking at this, what if your CFO or VP of Finance came to your accounts receivable manager and asked, okay, I needed to know how many invoices do we have that's more than 180 days past due, 120 days past due. I don't know how easy it is for you to answer that question, but with this dashboard, it's really simple. By just selecting on this column, I can now filter down all of the information that's the invoices that are 120 days past due. I can see I have 3 invoices in 3 different countries that are $160,000. Now I can take action. I can follow up with these customers and find out why they haven't paid. Or worst case scenario is I'm going to have to cancel these and write these off the books, but those are the decisions that now can easily and quickly be made by having insights into this information. And just as I showed you before in the building out of the URL action, the user now could actually navigate from this dashboard directly into Salesforce, see this invoice and opportunity, see the call notes, and be able to take action from there. So we're almost done walking through some of the different examples. Now, Tableau allows customers to pay us in a variety of different ways. Now, not very common that somebody's going to give you cash, but they might write you a check, or there's going to be a wire transfer, or EFT, or maybe they've gone into the online store and they've purchased it electronically and have paid with a credit card. Well, we wanted to monitor how customers are paying us. Which particular credit cards are we going to allow customers to use? Because each one of them is going to come with different fees that are going to be associated with that. So here's just some insights into that. We have a volume here, kind of number of payments in the top left. We also then have the dollar amounts that are associated with those. Now, it's not real easy with the tables at the top to see what that distribution is, or maybe what the average cost per transaction is. Well, with these graphs at the bottom, I can quickly see that 48% of the volume of my transactions are coming from credit cards. It makes sense, but they only represent 12% of the total because they're lower dollar transactions. So now you're going to have all those additional fees that are coming across with that. And then because we have the total as well as the number, we then can do a simple calculation here and kind of see what the average order size is with this information. Now this next dashboard is pretty exciting. Now, unless you're in the treasury or the cash side of your house, you may not think it's that cool. But it was this analysis that has been a big part of what my team has been helping our treasury team do over the last year and a half. And actually all of the hard work that my team did as well as what our treasury team did actually earned us an award this year. It was the Adam Smith Award for leveraging technology in the treasury industry, in the treasury function. And this is just one of the dashboards that we've produced that allowed us to earn that award. But what we're doing here is we're taking the daily ending balances across all of our bank accounts and aggregating that information together into this dashboard. And now the user here can filter over any particular column and they can see on this day what was the amount in Australian dollars as a conversion into US dollars. And the user can interact with this in a variety of different ways. And if you want to download this workbook, here's one way in which you can do that. And we've also given a little helper here that explains a little bit about what this dashboard is doing. Now the colors that are here, as you can see, there's these black bars and these red bars. Well, the black bars represent us moving money into that currency, into that account. Maybe we're trying to load the information or load money, cash, into that account because we're about to make a big payment to a vendor in Australia, or maybe payroll cycle is hitting for the employees that are in that region. So, and then the red bars represent the take, the money that's being withdrawn from that account on those particular days. And this is just one example of the many ways in which we've been able to use Tableau inside of our treasury function. And it was part of a big webinar that we did earlier this year that I encourage you to check out. Now, this is maybe the not flashier stuff of maybe, any organization, I'm sure, is being asked by their executive team, particularly their CFO, to manage their T&E expenses because it's a big discretionary portion of their organization. So in this particular case, what we've done is we've connected to our information coming from Concur. So Concur is our expense reimbursement system. We use Agencia as our corporate travel agent. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to get insight into how long it was taking employees to submit their expense reports. So this is a naughty list, especially now around the holidays. We wanted to see which employee has the most outstanding and how many days is it past due. Now think about the impact that this has to your accounting team that's responsible for booking the accruals for these material expenses. And now they're having to reconcile these accruals every month in every period and just hope that it doesn't cross over a quarter or over a year. So having additional insight into this information can hopefully reduce some of that demand, hopefully make your accruals a little more accurate, and then thus make your reporting more accurate. So I mentioned that we use Concur as well as Agencia to bring in some of our travel and entertainment expenses. This is a dashboard that we created about 3 years ago for our Tableau conference in 2016. And what we did is we connected directly to stock reports from Concur so that anybody that is a customer of Concur and a customer of Tableau would be able to start to visualize this information. And so you can use this URL up here to be able to download this workbook. But now we have easy insight into all of this expense data. I can select dinner here, and now everything has been highlighted to show me the distribution by expense in the tree map, or highlighted in this scatter plot. Or maybe I also want to just see what the outliers are. I mean, Jaslyn has over almost $40,000 in expense. That's a lot. I mean, it's almost twice as much as most of the rest of the employees. Or this employee who is booking lots of expense reports. So they must be doing a lot of traveling. So these are dashboards that you can use to monitor what your employees are doing, use them as validation against maybe your T&E policies, also be used by your internal audit teams to be able to look for and manage fraud. And talking about fraud and internal audit, here is a dashboard that our internal audit team is using to look for a common scenario of duplicate amounts. So maybe someone is submitting a lot of things that are all the same amount. That seems a little unusual, right? Especially if they're all rounded off to particular numbers. And so here we can see this employee is in their customer solutions team. If I highlight or click on this reference bar, it's now pulled back all of the transactions, and I can start to dig into this a little bit further. You know, it's kind of odd that parking as well as dinner, everything is all only at $50. Maybe they're just being lazy and it's trying to come in below the radar as far as an expense policy. Maybe they don't have to submit a receipt if for anything that's under $50. Those are just be things that you can start to analyze and look into. So I'm going to wrap things up looking at some of the data that's coming out of our Agencia system. And so Agencia is where we're booking all of our travel, whether it's airlines, hotel, car rentals, and things like that. And so this was also a starter workbook that we created for the Tableau conference in 2016 that uses just stock reports out of Agencia. And so if any of you are Agencia customers, I strongly encourage you to check out this resource page. But what we're doing is we're allowing the user now to get insights. This could be your travel manager within your organization, or maybe somebody in your FP&A team who's trying to monitor these discretionary expenses so they can ensure that we're forecasting them correctly in our models. And the user here with parameters can change what they're looking at. Right now it's defaulting to days average purchase. Maybe I want to look at ticket count instead, or maybe I want to look at the dollars. Now, when you're dealing with online travel, the user can interact or book their travel in a couple of different ways. One is they can book it online using the website, or maybe they have to call somebody and get some assistance. Well, the moment they make the phone call, it's now going to cost the organization more money. And so now we can get insight into with this action filter. Now I want to look at everything only that was booked online, or maybe I want to look at everything that was agent assist. So it's a starting point for that analysis and the exploration. And this is just one of the many dashboards that are available to you in that starter workbook. So the last two before we jump into Q&A is to look at a deep dive into the travel expense. Now the user here has the ability to see what is the distribution across the regions, the cost centers. Here's our naughty list of who our top spenders are, and the user can interact with this in a variety of different ways. Now it's telling us up here that, okay, let's select a travel type to filter. So the colors here are serving as a color legend, but they're also working as an action filter. So now if I select hotel, all of the information on this dashboard has now been filtered down to just hotel. Well, maybe I want to look at my car expenses instead, and I can do that as well. Or maybe I want to dig into a particular employee. So this employee is our top spender at $56,000. I can see that they're in the US region. They're in cost center 1120. I have a visual representation of all of their travel over time, and I actually have the itinerary details. So I can see in December of 2013, they flew to Philadelphia and they stayed in the Sheraton Suites. Now, travel data lends itself to putting it on a map. Of course, you have to have the information to do this. What we did, and this isn't a simple thing to do, is we now created a network map of every airport that was an origin or a destination. Now, for this to work, you have to have the lat-long coordinates for all of those airports. Thankfully, that is built inside of Tableau. But to do the network map, you're going to have to do an outer join so that you can have both endpoints. And there's lots of information available on our website to talk about how you can build these network maps. But what the user now can do is they can see information in these customized tooltips of how much they've spent, how many flights, what was the average cost per segment. I can highlight on London Heathrow, and now all of the destinations that those employees flew to have been highlighted here. I can see the pairs of those flights as well. So we can see it's very common for employees to be flying from London Heathrow to San Francisco. Now, we filtered the map up here to only show all of the inbound US flights. With this parameter, I can say, I want to see everything. Now, this is going to be a big mess, but you can just see just some of the flexibility that the user has available with those filters. So I hope that we've shown you some cool ways that you can start to use Tableau inside of your finance organization to make decisions and to drive the growth and change the behavior inside of your teams. Now, if you want to see more ways in which you can be using Tableau inside of your finance team, please check out this on-demand webinar series, the Fast Flexible Finance Analytics. This is now the 6th part of that webinar series, and there's a lot of great information that's available to all of you. So we're going to pause here for a second, and I'm going to look through some of the questions that are available and try and answer them in the next couple of minutes. I know we've gone a couple minutes over. So the first question I have is, how would you create a count of customers by aging group and display that on a dashboard? Well, we already have, we know who the customers are. So you could do a distinct count of your customer IDs to get that. And then we have also calculated our aging buckets. So just by bringing both of those measure values together onto a dashboard, we would be able to visualize that. So somebody's asked, how is consolidated revenue calculated? Well, when I say consolidated, this is at the aggregate level for the entire Tableau entity. So, we have multiple subsidiaries across multiple regions, and so the consolidators, the consolidated financials for the organization. So, hopefully that kind of makes sense as far as what we're doing there. And by consolidated as well, what we're trying to do is we're trying to resolve all of the foreign exchange rates. So some of those subsidiaries may be dealing in different currencies, and we've been able to resolve all of that into just US dollars. So somebody's asking about financial edge. Somebody asked me this question in a previous webinar as well. I'm not familiar with financial edge, so I can't say for sure whether or not Tableau would be able to connect to financial edge. But what I would recommend that you do is look to see if there's an ODBC driver or some sort of way in which you can kind of export some of that information. Okay, another one. How did you get your Concur data into the Tableau data environment? Well, so Concur exposes a reporting platform that you then, what we've done is we've just written some custom reports. Part of that was leveraging some of the reporting services that were available to us at Concur to build out some custom reports that we wanted to. And then what we're doing is we're taking that information that's in those Excel files, and then we're loading it into a database. So we're doing these files once a week, and then we're just appending that information into our reporting environment. Now, Concur does have an API. The last time that we checked into it, the Concur API was an added service cost, and at the time we weren't willing to incur that cost. Now I know they have some new things that are coming along that are hopefully going to make it a little bit easier to get information out of Concur, but if you have any interest in understanding how you can get your information from Concur, I would strongly recommend that you check out the travel and expense website, where we have videos and a white paper that talk through a process of doing that. So 2 more questions here, and then we'll let everybody go. So can someone subscribe to an alert if it says an employee exceeds some policy limit in my travel example? Absolutely yes. So what you can do is on a dashboard, you can set a target, and then at the moment that that target is exceeded, you would be notified of that. We're using that for a lot of different things, like let's say we're trying to do real-time monitoring of our ETL cycles, and we're expecting that process to be running every 2 hours. If we've gone 30 minutes past that, we want to be known or be notified of that. Our sales team is using that to maybe monitor whether or not they've exceeded their quotas or their targets. It can be used in a lot of different ways. Somebody's asking, what do we use as a budgeting software? So as many organizations, many years ago, we started out in Excel, and maybe some of you are still doing it in Excel, and there's nothing wrong with that. Others may be using other products. We are currently using Anaplan as our budgeting and forecasting tool. So as we're wrapping up those plans, or we're doing those reforecasts, we're then exporting that information out of Anaplan and then loading into our reporting servers so that we can bring those forecasts and budget together with our actuals. And then the last question I'm going to answer is, can you create waterfall charts in Tableau? You can. It takes I haven't done it very many times, so I don't have any good examples to show you, but there is the ability to do that. So I would strongly encourage you to go out, just do a Google search or any other web search on waterfall charts inside of Tableau, and I'm sure that you'll get some results. We have an incredible Tableau community, and there'll be some examples on how we've done that. So I want to thank all of you for joining us for this latest webinar and our Fast Flexible Finance Analytics webinar. Be sure to check out some of the others and have fun. Enjoy. Goodbye.